I've been a doctor for 22 years, and I would like to tell you I saw it coming. I didn't, not even close. My name is Dr. Garrett Fols, senior attending at Mill Haven Regional's Trauma and Critical Care Department the morning of the Naval Medicine Partnership Summit. A regional affair, 3 admirals from the Tidewater Command, a pair of Navy surgeons, half a dozen hospital brass, and a room full of department heads who'd spent a week polishing their presentations. I had 31 years combined of residency and practice behind me. I had a wall of citations, a department I ran with a short leash, and an opinion about every nurse, tech, and aide who worked my floor. I want you to understand that, so you understand how completely I was wrong. Her name was Claire Vermont. She'd been assigned to my floor 8 weeks earlier, a travel nurse, a slot fill, the kind of face you see once and forget. Quiet, maybe 30, dark hair pulled back tight, always in the same Navy scrubs, badge on a plain white lanyard. She didn't talk much, she didn't push back. She came in, did her work, and left. I registered her the way you register furniture. She was there, fine. 2 weeks in, I told her to relabel an entire educational tray she'd prepped correctly, because I'd decided the layout wasn't how I liked it done. She nodded and did it over. No argument. That's what I remember. Just that quiet nod. 3 weeks later, Dr. Haverstock, our chief of medicine, a man who ran hot and spoke first, stopped her in the corridor outside my bay and told her loudly enough for the orderlies to hear that she was moving like a glorified Aide, and that if she couldn't keep pace she should say so, and he'd find someone who could. It was a Tuesday. She had just come off a double. She nodded, said, "Yes, sir," and went back to her station. Haverstock didn't look back. I watched from the doorway and said nothing. I'm not proud of that. The summit was a Thursday. We had 2 conference spaces commandeered on the 2nd floor and a VIP reception set up in the atrium below. The admirals were due at 10. By 8:15, half my department had found reasons to orbit the 2nd floor. I was up there myself, standing with a cup of coffee, outside the main briefing room, watching the Navy contingent get settled through the glass panel in the door. Claire was in there. That surprised me. She was standing along the back wall with a handful of nurses and care coordinators. Floor staff invited as courtesy, the kind of gesture hospital administrators make to look inclusive, and then promptly ignore. She was holding a notepad. She looked like she was waiting to take someone's coat. The lead admiral, a rear admiral named Kress, from what I gathered, compact and gray-haired in full dress whites, was at the head of the table, reviewing something with his aide. 2 other officers flanked him. Haverstock was mid-room, glad-handing the Navy surgeons. The chief nursing officer, Margot Elland, was near the door. The room was coming to order, and then Admiral Kress looked up. He scanned the room the way senior officers do, not searching, just taking inventory, and his eyes passed over the tables, the suits, the uniforms, and then they reached the back wall and stopped. He stopped. I saw it through the glass. His aide kept talking. Kress wasn't listening. He was looking at Claire Vermont. She had gone still. And in the space of maybe 2 seconds, she raised her left hand slightly, closed her first 2 fingers over her palm, tapped twice against her lanyard. A small gesture, a thing you'd miss if you blinked. Half the room didn't see it. I saw it because I happened to be watching her face. Kress was on his feet before I could parse what had happened. Not rising slowly, coming to stand as you do when decorum calls for it. He was upright in a single motion, chair scraping back, and his 2 officers were up a half beat behind him. Trained reaction, like a reflex they'd spent years building. The aide stopped mid-sentence. Haverstock turned. Every set of eyes in the room swung to the back wall. I pushed open the door. Kress crossed the room in 8 steps. The Navy surgeons separated to let him through. He stopped in front of Claire Vermont and he said, quietly enough that I had to move closer to catch it, "I'll be damned, Vermont," she said. "Good morning, sir," he said. "You're working here," she said. "Yes, sir, 8 weeks." He shook his head once, like a man recalculating something he thought he'd already filed away, and then he turned to Margot Elland. Not to Haverstock, not to the chief of surgery, not to any of the administrators who'd spent a week preparing for this room, to the chief nursing officer. And he said, loud enough now for everyone, "Do you know who you have here?" Nobody answered. Kress turned back to Claire and said, "With your permission," she said. "It's your call, sir." He nodded once. He reached into the inside breast pocket of his whites and produced a folded card, not large, cream-colored, flat from what looked like years in that pocket. And he handed it to his aide without looking. The aide unfolded it and began to read, and I want to tell you every word because I have thought about them every day since that morning. Lieutenant Commander Claire Veramont, United States Navy Nurse Corps. 3 deployments, 2 of them forward deployed, with a joint surgical team embedded with Special Operations Forces in the Helmand Corridor. During the 2nd deployment, on a night when their forward operating base took indirect fire and their only surgeon was down, she ran triage and primary surgical measurement for 11 casualties over a 6-hour period, without a physician. 11. She kept 9 of them alive. For that night's work, she received the Navy Commendation Medal with Combat Distinguishing Device. For the actions of her 3rd deployment, classified, the aide said, classified at a level he was not reading aloud in this room, she had been awarded the Defense Meritorious Service Medal and a citation that Rear Admiral Kress himself had signed. The room was not breathing. I looked at Haverstock. He had gone the color of old chalk. He was holding his coffee cup with both hands, like he needed something to do with them, and he was staring at the back wall, at a woman he had called a glorified aide 48 hours before. She was standing the same as she always stood, quiet, her hands at her sides, her badge on that plain white lanyard, not smiling, not performing, just present, the way she was always present, in a way I had apparently never been paying enough attention to understand. Kress turned to the room. He said, "Before we begin this morning, I want this hospital's leadership to understand something." He paused. Not for effect, just the pause of a man who chooses words the way a surgeon chooses instruments. The work you all do here matters. What you have in this building matters more than you may know. And the people doing it quietly, without decoration, without credit, those are the people who carried the rest of us home. Then he turned back to Claire. He came to attention. Full attention, heels together the way you do for a flag or an anthem or a fallen comrade, and he saluted her. His 2 officers saluted, the aides saluted. The Navy surgeons, 4 of them, career men in Navy khaki, snapped to attention along the wall and saluted a travel nurse in a pair of Navy scrubs, who had relabeled my medication tray because I'd told her the layout wasn't how I liked it done. She returned the salute, precise, clean, the movement of someone who had done it 1,000 times. I heard someone's hand behind me exhale like they'd been holding their breath for a month. Margot Ellen did not say anything for a long moment. Then she stepped forward, gently, her hand on Claire's arm, and said something I couldn't hear. Claire listened, nodded, and almost, not quite, but almost, smiled. Haverstock put his coffee cup down on the nearest table. He looked at it for a second. Then he looked across the room at Claire, and he could not hold it. He looked at the floor. That was the sum total of what he had left. The summit proceeded. Claire took her seat at the back of the room, same as before. She took the same notes. But every officer in that room, every time they passed her, found a reason to pause. A nod, a word, a moment of deliberate attention that made it plain they knew something the rest, to us, had been too busy to learn. I went back to the floor after the morning session. I went to the nurse's station and I waited until Claire came through on rounds. When she came up to the station, I asked her, as evenly as I could manage, if she had a minute. She said yes. I told her that what had happened in that room, that I had not known, and that I should have treated her better, regardless of what I knew or didn't know, and that the relabeling of the medication in particular had been unnecessary, and I was sorry for it. She looked at me for a moment, and then she said, "I appreciate that, Dr. Folse." That was all. No lecture, no satisfaction in her voice. Just, "I appreciate that." And then she went back to work. "I've thought about those 4 words more than anything," Admiral Kress said. Psst. There's a thing I understand now that I did not understand that morning when I was standing in the corridor with my coffee cup, watching a woman I had categorized as furniture wait politely to take someone's coat. Competence doesn't ask for your attention. It doesn't knock. It doesn't announce itself in the break room or lobby for recognition or correct you in front of the department. It just does the work, every shift, and if you're paying close enough attention, if you're willing to actually look, you'll see it. And if you're not willing to look, One day, someone who knows better will walk into your briefing room and show you what you missed. I was not paying close enough attention. I know that now. Claire Veramont finished her travel contract 4 weeks later. She gave her 2-week notice professionally, trained her replacement thoroughly, and on her last day she left the ward the way she'd arrived. Quietly, without ceremony, in the same navy scrubs, badge on the plain white lanyard. I don't know where she went. I didn't ask, and I think I was right not to. Some people don't need to be followed. They've already been somewhere you haven't. And they'll be somewhere else again, before you finish deciding what to make of them. What I know is this. 9 men came home from a night that should have taken them all, and for the last 8 weeks of a travel contract, the woman who brought them home relabeled my medication tray when I told her to, and said, "Yes, sir," to a man who called her a glorified aide. I think about that every morning when I walk into this building. I think I always will.